Metabolic and Lifestyle-Driven Cancer Risk Evolution. A 36-year solid and fluid viscoplastic energy study integrated with topological data analysis. Number 1471, VPT-032, December 19, 2025. Gerald C. Shu, EclaireMD Foundation. Category: Oncology, fluid-VMT, solid-VMT, TDA methodology. Mission statement: I write these medical papers not for fame or recognition. I have already lived a long and successful life, though not always a healthy one. My purpose now is to share what I have learned about health, disease, and medicine, so that others can better understand their own conditions, prevent illness, and live longer, healthier lives. Preface: This paper integrates two complementary lines of my cancer risk research. The first is a solid VMT-based longitudinal analysis of cancer risk, over a 36-year period from 1990 through 2025, focusing on cumulative stress-strain interactive energy caused by metabolism and lifestyle. This analysis quantifies how risk was built, peaked, and later reversed through disciplined lifestyle control. The second is a fluid VMT plus topological data analysis, interpretation of the same data, where cancer risk is viewed as a long-term, biomedical flow process rather than an endpoint disease. In this framework, radar geometry and topological data continuity are used to visualize how risk evolves smoothly through time. By combining these two perspectives, this paper presents a complete systems-level picture of cancer risk preparation, accumulation, stabilization, and reversal. This paper number 1471 is a direct extension of my earlier work, paper number 1372, completed on September 30, 2025. Introduction. Cancer is often described as a sudden, random, or genetic event. However, large-scale epidemiological evidence paints a different picture. Only about 5 to 10% of cancers are driven primarily by inherited genetic mutations. Environmental exposures account for roughly 20 to 25%. The remaining majority, approximately 65 to 75%, are linked to metabolic dysfunction and lifestyle-related factors such as obesity, diabetes, chronic inflammation, diet, physical inactivity, poor sleep, high stress, and long-term hormonal imbalance. These metabolic and lifestyle-driven mechanisms unfold slowly over decades. They do not act as isolated triggers. Instead, they prepare an internal biological environment that either suppresses or enables malignant transformation. Because genetic and environmental exposures are difficult to quantify longitudinally, my research focuses on controllable, influential factors of both metabolism and lifestyle. This domain not only represents the largest share of cancer causation, but also allows continuous self-collection of meaningful data over long time horizons. 5 cancer pathways linked to metabolism. This study focuses on 5 different types of cancer that are strongly influenced by metabolic and lifestyle conditions. Liver cancer arises from chronic fat accumulation, inflammation, and scarring driven by excess calories, sugar, and diabetes. Colorectal cancer is promoted by obesity, hyperglycemia, low fiber intake, and altered gut microbiota. Pancreatic cancer is closely linked to diabetes and chronic insulin overload, which overstimulates pancreatic tissue. Post-menopausal breast cancer is driven by excess estrogen production from fat tissue, compounded by insulin resistance. Endometrial cancer is highly sensitive to unopposed estrogen, generated by obesity and diabetes. Across all 5 cancers, the same core mechanisms repeat: visceral fat accumulation, glucose dysregulation, inflammation, hormonal imbalance, and impaired immune surveillance. Solid VMT framework and cancer risk index. Using the viscoplastic medicine theory, VMT, energy model, cancer risk is defined as a strain output, generated by 5 input stressors. The cancer risk index is calculated as: obesity is dominated by visceral fat, which drives inflammation and hormonal disruption. Diabetes is measured primarily by fasting glucose and long-term glycemic load. Health age reflects accumulated systemic, where across metabolic and lifestyle domains, diet captures food quantity and carbohydrate burden. Steps and sleep represent circulation support and recovery capacity. This solid VMT formulation quantifies cumulative strain energy and allows comparison across time periods. 36-year solid VMT results. From 1990 to 2009, my cancer risk index rose steadily, reaching a peak value of 252 from 2002 to 2003. During this period, I relied primarily on medication while neglecting lifestyle control. As a result, more than half of my total cancer-related VMT energy, 55+%, accumulated over these 2 decades, from 1990 to 2009. After 2010, I adopted strict lifestyle management without medication. From that point onward, my cancer risk declined sharply and then stabilized. From 2024 to 2025, the index had fallen to 84, representing a 67+% reduction from the peak level. The remaining cancer-related VMT energy, 45+%, accumulated during the most recent 16 years, from 2010 to 2025, with only 4+% occurring during the period from 2014 to 2025. In summary, 96+% of total VMT energy accumulated during the first 24 years, from 1990 to 2013, while only 4+% accumulated during the most recent 12 years, from 2014 to 2025. The 36-year energy distribution reveals that early neglect laid the foundation for most of the cancer risk. Later discipline did not erase history, but it halted further accumulation and gradually released stored strain energy. Type 2 diabetes contributed the largest share of long-term cancer risk energy at 30%, followed by diet at 26%, steps and sleep at 18%, obesity at 14%, and health age at 12%. Why solid-VMT alone is incomplete? Solid-VMT excels at quantifying irreversible outcomes such as fibrosis, calcification, organ failure, or tumor formation. However, cancer risk itself is not an outcome. It is a preparation and progression process. My dataset contains no cancer diagnosis. This is not a limitation. It allows exclusive focus on upstream processes before structural failure occurs, to understand preparation rather than collapse. A fluid-based VMT interpretation is required. Fluid-VMT perspective. In fluid-VMT, biomarkers are reinterpreted as properties that describe the speed, smoothness, and stability of internal biomedical flows. Glucose becomes fuel flow speed rather than a static blood value. Visceral fat becomes endocrine drag rather than stored mass. Sleep becomes cellular clearance and repair flow rather than rest. Walking becomes circulation support rather than exercise. Stress hormones become flow disruptors or acute shock triggers. Under this lens, cancer risk emerges as long-term biomedical flow instability, rather than localized tissue damage. Radar geometry is fluid cross-sections. Radar charts 9F-TDA are used as geometric cross-sections of the flow field in fluid-VMT. Each biannual radar polygon represents the instantaneous flow resistance profile, created by 5 stressors. 3 representative periods were selected to illustrate the full arc. From 1990 to 1991 shows a large, distorted polygon dominated by diabetes and diet, indicating severe metabolic congestion and maximum internal drag. From 2012 to 2013 shows a smaller, more balanced polygon, reflecting partial flow recovery and energy release. From 2024 to 2025 shows the smallest, tightest, and most symmetric polygon, indicating near equilibrium and minimal cancer risk preparation. The progressive contraction of TDA radar geometry directly mirrors cumulative fluid-VMT energy reduction. Topological data analysis interpretation. When radar slices are stacked longitudinally, they form a continuous geometric surface representing the evolution of the health state through time. Each biannual period is treated as a point in 6-dimensional space, composed of 5 stressors and 1 strain output. Distances between points quantify geometric change. The resulting topological structure is smooth and continuous. There is no evidence of branching, splitting, or bifurcation. Health changes progress along a single, continuous flow path toward disease or recovery. This confirms that cancer risk evolution in this dataset follows one stable trajectory, governed by long-term flow of fluid dynamics, rather than multiple competing disease paths. Integrated fluid-VMT and TDA conclusion. This combined solid and fluid-VMT plus TDA study demonstrates that cancer risk is not an event. It is a decades-long process. Solid-VMT quantifies how cumulative metabolic stress builds strain energy, and how disciplined lifestyle intervention releases it. Fluid-VMT explains how that same process unfolds as progressive flow, instability and later stabilization from a view of fluid dynamics. TDA provides the geometric language that connects these processes into a single continuous trajectory. Together, they show that prevention is not about repairing broken structures after failure. It is about restoring and maintaining stable biomedical flow, long before irreversible damage occurs. Cancer is prepared and progressed quietly. It can also be quietly prevented. Core insight. Cancer risk accumulates through disrupted flow, chronic metabolic drag, and loss of internal coherence. It stabilizes through sustained lifestyle, discipline that restores circulation, clearance, and energy balance. This is the central message of fluid-VMT, solid-VMT, plus TDA. My realization of the similarity and difference between solid-VMT and fluid-VMT. In my solid-VMT work, I focus primarily on the final distribution of VMT, energy percentages associated with each stressor. This approach emphasizes cumulative contribution and irreversible outcomes, allowing me to quantify how much each factor has contributed to long-term damage. In contrast, my fluid-VMT work examines the temporal patterns of input and output data, the trajectory of stress-strain curves, and the accumulation or release of fluid-VMT energy at each time period. This approach emphasizes the fluid dynamic process of disease preparation and recovery rather than the final outcome alone. As a result, fluid-VMT focuses on how health evolves over time, while solid-VMT focuses on where the system ultimately ends. From my observations, the distinction between these different research approaches can be summarized clearly. In solid-VMT, I emphasize energy partition among stressors, cumulative and often irreversible deformation, outcomes such as calcification, fibrosis, tumor formation, or organ failure. The question of how much damage each factor has contributed. In fluid-VMT, I emphasize trajectory, direction, and smoothness of a fluid dynamic system evolution, how inputs and outputs move together through time, stress-strain paths, rates, and continuity, the question of how the system evolved to its current state, and whether it can be redirected. In short, solid-VMT is outcome-oriented, while fluid-VMT is process-oriented. Solid-VMT tells me where the system ends up. Fluid-VMT tells me how the system moves. This distinction is physically sound, mathematically consistent, and conceptually coherent. It also explains why fluid-VMT integrates naturally with topological data analysis, which focuses on continuity, shape, and trajectory, while solid-VMT aligns more closely with pathology and traditional outcome-based risk scoring. Disclaimer: this content is provided for educational reference only, and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and related materials belong to the author, Gerald C. Shue.